Hello and welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Turning our attention to the Iranian nuclear talks right now. Today, those talks continued in Vienna, Austria, between six world powers and Iran as the country continues to pursue final settlement on Tehran's disputed nuclear program. So far, the countries, the six world powers, have been able to agree on just one thing, and that's a timetable and framework for negotiation. The talks come despite warnings from both sides that a deal simply may not be possible. The meeting is expected to last 2 or 3 days. It's the first time the powers, the United States, Russia, China, France, Britain, and Germany, are all meeting again after striking an interim accord with Iran in November of last year. Under the accord, Iran was supposed to scale back its most sensitive nuclear work in return for some relief from sanctions. The U.S. and President Obama are saying that they remain firm on enforcing existing sanctions throughout the interim agreement.
We have been extraordinarily firm that even during this interim agreement, we will fully enforce all applicable sanctions. In fact, we have taken various steps just over the last 6-7 weeks to identify companies that we felt were violating those sanctions, and have been very clear to the Iranians that there's not going to be any let-up.
Well, has he been clear with the American public? Still a lot of people concerned about some of the lack of transparency on this deal. The UN's Deputy Director General says progress does continue to be made. Progress needs to be made in the talks, but there are still many outstanding issues.
With respect to the past outstanding issues, we have agreed on the first measure to take place by the 15th of May. So there is still, of course, work to be done on the past issues, and we will address them all in due course.
Now, if there is a final deal, Western governments want to define the permissible scope of an Iranian nuclear program and resolve their concerns that Tehran is seeking the capacity to build an atomic bomb. Iran, which denies having any such goal, wants the complete removal of painful economic sanctions imposed by Washington and other countries, European governments, and the United Nations as well. But some in Congress remain skeptical about the ability of these talks to accomplish anything, including Congressman Peter Roskam of Illinois. He's among the skeptic, and he calls these talks a fool's errand. Joining us right now to talk about this is the Congressman. Congressman, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's talk about this a little bit more. And let me be naive a little bit for a second. How can it be a bad thing if we're sitting down at the table to talk with Iran? In the run-up to the 2012 elections, we were talking about possible military action.
It's a bad thing in this sense. The Iranians have pulled a ruse on the administration, and that is a false claim that there is such a thing as a peaceful nuclear Iranian ambition. It does not exist. The Iranians have a desire to get nuclear weapons in order to manipulate the world. They are one of the largest state sponsors of terror. Their human rights record is despicable. So this idea that somehow the Iranians are concerned about energy independence or global warming, and that's why they're pursuing a nuclear ambition, is ridiculous. And the administration is desperate to make a deal, the Obama administration, and they are, I think, putting in jeopardy what was a successful sanctions campaign against the Iranians that drew the Iranians, ironically, to the table.
Now, among the other pessimists out there, and I'm not trying to compare you in any way, shape, or form to the Supreme Leader, but the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, has been very public about saying these nuclear talks will not go anywhere. You mentioned some of the reasons why you think the U.S. might be engaging in them, but do you think more harm than good, obviously, is going to come from this?
I do think more harm than good comes from it, and here's why. The Iranians get at least $7 billion in cash and sanctions relief within the 6 months that the sanctions in place, and then you've got to constantly adjust and put pressure and realign and reach out and make other changes to keep the pressure on. So it's all about momentum. So what does this say to the world? It says to the world that the U.S. is now easing up on sanctions, and you're going to find other countries that were reluctant to participate with us now looking at the very first opportunity they have to change course in order to get into an Iranian marketplace.
Now, was there any point, Congressman, in these negotiations, whether publicly or privately, that you were a little bit more optimistic? You thought something good might come out of this?
I've got a pretty low expectation. I mean, when you look at who the Iranians are, you look at how they're treating American citizens who are in captivity right now, their incredibly low view of being a participant in the general community of nations, how they're active with Hezbollah. You know what I mean? All of these different things that they're doing. Why in the world would we empower that regime to give them more authority to enhance things? Right now, when the Iranians make threats against the Straits of Hormuz and saying that they're going to close them, for example, you know, we can say that's just a bit of saber rattling. Can you imagine what a nuclear-armed Iran would be like? Those threats turn from threats into action.
And the other concern there, too, is the domino effect of other countries in the region wanting to get a nuclear weapon as well. Now, I want to talk about your legislation that you introduced. It has bipartisan support. It would prevent Iran from getting its nuclear weapons. It would define specific parameters that would need to be in place, and it could bring about new sanctions. Tell us a little bit more about your plan and where you think it's going to go moving forward.
Well, I think there's a couple things that have to happen. Number one, Senator Reid should put on the floor Senator Kirk and Senator Menendez's legislation as it relates to sanctions. This jumps out and enhances it. What we're trying to do is to say, all right, now 6 months out, these are the types of things that the administration needs to do and needs to attend to. My view is, all right, they've made this decision. Let's rub some dirt on it and figure out how to move forward. But this whole notion of pursuing the Iranians, taking them at face value when they have been, frankly, so forthcoming, and the Iranian leadership, the point you made a minute ago, is that they're making it very clear that they intend to dismantle nothing. So then we get into this whole idea of then what are we talking about? We're talking
and that's the question, Congressman, and we'll see if these talks will go anywhere. Thank you so much for being with us. We got to run. Interesting take there from the Congressman. What do you think about what Congressman Roskam had to say about the situation in Iran? Are we simply wasting our time with these talks in Austria as well? We want to hear from you. Tweet us directly, me directly at @JohnB_Newsmax, or any of us here at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. When we come right back after the break, we'll be taking a closer look at our personal impact segment. Derek Jeter, retiring from the Yankees, why he's a class act, and why we wish there were more athletes like him in the world today.